Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Writing Podcast. I'm your host Adam, and as always, I'm here with Lindsay Broker. And today we have a really interesting show. We're going to talk to each other and talk to ourselves. Which is code word for we couldn't get a guest fast enough. But no, we did come up with some good topics that what Lindsay's going to talk about I find interesting, and I hope what I'm going to talk about she does. So maybe you guys will also find it interesting. We'll see. All right. So we are going to have a little bit shorter of a show as well because we're starting late. So we'll get right into it. So Lindsay, I know you had a few questions. I've talked a little bit before about how my wife and I publish together, and you said you had a few questions about that. So if you want to kick it off with some questions.
Sure. And it's not that we can get a guest. It's just that none of the people who wanted to be on the show were cool enough. Yeah, that's it. Maybe. Okay. Never mind. We couldn't get a guest. All right. So, I've never co-authored with anyone. So kind of for the writing half of the show today, I'm going to pump Adam for some questions on kind of how he got started writing with his wife and just sort of how the whole process is going for him. And we'll see if he has any tips, because I think it's something that a lot of people are interested in, but maybe don't know how to get started or find somebody that would be a good match. So why don't you kind of tell us about how you guys are going about things and like when you got started and how you got started?
Sure. So when we first started writing for the purpose of self-publishing, I was actually still doing my corporate job at the time, so I couldn't write that incredibly much, but I would help out as much as I can with plot and things like that. And so it was pretty natural for me to help her more than write my own stuff. So that's sort of how it sparked to begin with. And the first book, pretty much we just brainstormed together a little bit, and then she just pantsed it out, if anyone watched the last show. And it's good. It's fine. We had to go back and rewrite it a bit though, almost a year later when we were better. I know you're not supposed to do that usually, but we did, and worked out for us. It started selling better. But it's changed a lot since then. We actually looked up some ways to plot and things like that. And we do kind of a modified version of beats in a way. And I can explain that some more in a little bit. But really, now that I left my corporate job last year, we've kind of made this schedule, so to say. And we find it way more productive, obviously, with two people tackling the same book. Rather than one. So do you want me to tell you what our process is, or?
Yes, and after I unmute myself, I'll ask that very question. Yeah, but sure. Tell us kind of like who does the writing, or if you both write, or if one person is the outliner, or how it works.
Okay. So like I said, it was a lot different in the early days, so to say, where basically we just brainstormed, and that was the extent of my contribution other than editing once it was all done. So back then, we'd brainstorm out a basic story arc. She would write it. I wouldn't look at it again until it was done. And then I would go through and edit it. But I would also put in like rewriting suggestions, like I may rewrite a paragraph or two and say, use what you want of this. And then she would go through. So after I left my job and we kind of wanted to buckle down and make sure that we were being as productive as we could at that time with it, we divided the days up. Basically, every weekday we have about 7 hours where we do actual writing-oriented stuff, give or take. I mean, some days are more. And it's basically 3 hours for me and 4 hours for her, with breaks in there. But what we do is for a brand new book, we do the brainstorming, which usually consists of her sitting with her laptop. And I don't know what it is, but anytime I'm talking on the phone or talking to her or anything, I pace and walk around the whole house. I don't know if anyone else out there does that or has that problem. So I walk back and forth around the living room and stuff, and I throw out ideas, and we try to come up with the main conflicts, like Libby was talking about before on the previous show about piling on the conflict and things to your heroes. So I do that portion, and she kind of calls any problem she sees with it, and we come to an agreement on what the main story arc should be, and generally we agree on most of it. So once we have that kind of jotted down, our books are, well, they're paranormal, more like urban fantasy, I guess, because if you look for paranormal now on Amazon, you'll just get big beautiful werewolves or whatever. So it's mainly urban fantasy, and they tend to be 70 to 80,000 words. So our chapters are usually 2,000, 2,500, something like that. So it usually always ends up to be about 27, 28 chapters. So then we mark those down, and we kind of fill in just a sentence, really similar to beats, like the basic beats of each chapter. And a lot of times we may only know like 5 or 6 chapters, a couple in the beginning, a couple in the middle, and usually the ending. We usually brainstorm that out. And once we have those in there, we try to fill in just a sentence. But again, at this point, it's just a really rough beats. Each chapter at this point just has basically a sentence. And so that's what we usually do in the first couple of days of a new project. There's usually not any real writing in the novel at that point. And once we have that down and we're ready to go in the writing phase, how that works is in the morning, my wife will go into the writing office and she will write 2 chapters, which usually ends up being, about 5,000 words or so, sometimes a little more. And then I'll go in after her and I will read what she's written, editing it and rewriting anything that I think needs rewritten. And that also, once we do that in the start, I then type the beats for the next 2 chapters. And because I've read the previous 2, the beats are a lot fresher, what I need to do. And I mean, I can think of a lot more stuff than when we were pacing around with just a rough idea, because I've actually started reading the story. So I write down the beats for the next chapters, and my wife reads those and edits the beats, basically. And the next day we go through that same process. So I guess what it boils down to in the writing stage is I write really detailed beats for her, then pass them to her. She writes those chapters. I read and edit those chapters, and then it just continues like that every day. So one good thing about this is that when it gets to the end, when a novel is fully written, it's pretty well edited. It's pretty polished already, both story and grammar and everything, because we both have went through it multiple times. When we do get to the end, I then go through it. She goes through it first from start to finish once, and then I go through it again, and then we send it out to betas and editors and things like that. So I know it may sound a little complicated, but it's worked pretty well for us. So that's the process you were asking.
All right, and now I'm curious, as somebody who's very, I guess, in love with my words, I'm like, nobody else can write my characters like I do, kind of thing. I would really have a hard time letting somebody else like rewrite some of my stuff. Do you guys have any conflict like that, or does it just work out really well?
For the most part, it works out really well. We do have disagreements on things, of course. For anyone watching that plans on reading her first series, I'm going to spoil the ending to the first series. So, mute us for like 2 minutes. But for instance, the first series that we finished, the main, this is really taboo in this, and I guess any non-tragedy type books that you read, I was like, the main love interest, the main Mel, this book makes sense. The storyline makes the most sense if he ends up dying in this one, just by how things have went at the end. And she was like, no, I can never kill him. There's no way. And so we argued about that the whole time she was writing the book. And all the way up until I didn't even write that he died in the beats. I made something else up. And then I went back to edit the last 2 chapters, and she had wrote that he died. I was like, so you killed him? And she's like, yeah, don't talk to me about it. So, there are disagreements that end up working out. And then there's some, the books are under her name or initials. So it ends up being, her name's Caleb. It ends up being K.A. Poe. Is the pen name that we put them out under. And I don't know, we usually talk through it, and there can be some kind of argument type things in the middle where I'm like, this really doesn't make sense. And she's like, what do you mean? I really like that paragraph. I'm like, well, I just don't think anyone's going to like it. I don't think it works well. So we usually come up with compromises, but we definitely run into those. Another thing that we do is that we both have strong points that how we write. So I think I've mentioned before that I'm not saying this to brag or anything. She tells me this. So I'm better at writing the character development kind of dialogue stuff and actiony things, and she's much better at descriptive world building and love interest type stuff and developing all that stuff. So a lot of it is piecing those parts together. And like I mentioned, I don't know, in one of our early shows, there's some points in when I'm reading through where she's like, insert, a gunfight here because I don't know what I would say, you know what I mean? And then I'll write a couple paragraphs that's that actiony scene. And I think both of us going through and editing after the fact and continuing to polish it makes it pretty seamless, though. I don't think reading it you can tell that two people have written it.
Okay. Do you think that anybody could kind of co-author, or does it take a special person with that really can put their ego aside? Like, I'm being totally honest. I don't know if I could do it. I just yeah, it'd be hard. I'd have to do something where maybe one person writes one chapter from one character's point of view, and the other person totally has the other character's point of view. I could see doing something like that, but I don't know. Do you think anybody could learn how to co-author?
I think they could. I mean, there are definitely some personalities that would probably clash more than ours. My wife and I, obviously, we've been together for 10 years, and we've probably got all of our arguing type things out of the way. We don't have much conflict of that sort anymore, so we compromise pretty well. But as far as co-authoring with someone, I would say that don't jump right into it right away. You should probably see if you guys are compatible, because I mean, everyone's different for sure. But as far as what you said about each person writing a different character's point of view, I've seen that, and that works pretty well. The last podcast that you and I started hosting, Carl Sinclair from that one, I know, co-authored a novel with Darren Wearmouth, and that's what they did. I talked to him about it through Facebook, actually, not on a podcast or anything, and they had sort of an outline of beats and whatnot, and each one switched, between a point of view each chapter, and they just kind of lined those up. So that may be a good way to ease into it. And another thing is, if you do look for someone to write with it, you want to get someone that's dedicated to it as well. Like I said, with our stuff, if I didn't go in and edit those couple chapters and do the next beats, she wouldn't be able to continue, without me doing that. So make sure it's someone that's reliable to do those scheduled things also.
Well, that's good, and I think it's actually more rare than you think that like a married couple could get along and really do that well together. So I played tennis, and you play doubles, and you never see married couples playing on the same team because they would just kill each other and get into fights and stuff. So, but maybe that's not quite as adrenaline running in writing. So,
yeah, probably not. The only blood pumping is me, pacing around the room trying to figure out, who does what. That's about it. So.
Okay, so one of the things I'm wondering, I can see where it would be a benefit if one person's stronger, like you were saying, in one area, and the other person's better in another area. What do you think some of the benefits are of co-authoring?
Well, one thing, like I said, is we get to divide the time. So I can imagine, especially if someone, like you said, is doing a separate character, and I mean, it's well plotted out beforehand, so you don't run into writing it incorrectly. You don't want the characters to miss each other, so to say. But if it's well plotted out and you're doing it in tandem, I mean, just by two people doing it, you could get more written, get it out faster. But again, that would, as if you can get it well plotted and get things together, or pretty smooth off the first draft, because all that time that you save, if you kind of screw that up, or the characters aren't meeting each other when they're supposed to or lining up correctly, you're going to have to go back and rewrite and edit, and that may take more time than it would have just writing it yourself. So that's one, is just the time benefit. For us, since we're both doing this full time now, we also have our young daughter, and it kind of works out well on a personal level for us, because either of us at the most are ever gone for 4 hour chunk doing things, and we just sort of pass it off. So that's another benefit, is you can either get things out faster, or if you just divide the time down the middle, like my wife and I, instead of her having an 8-hour writing day or self-published work day, she has a 4 and I have a 3 or 4. So as far as time, that's one advantage. As far as the writing, like you said, we both write our strongest parts, and I know when to put in there. I'm not sure how to make this touchy-feely enough. I don't know how to get their emotions sparked here. And a lot of times when I'm doing the beats, I'll just say something like, she should probably start falling in love with this person. I'm not sure how, but do whatever. And she does that. And then, like I said, when she gets to a part that's like in a recent book we wrote, there was they got to a point where these werewolves got in a fight, two opposing um, groups of werewolves, and she was like, I don't know how werewolves fight. I don't know how to do this. Just film this scene. And so I did. So again, both of us playing to our strengths, and also the time advantage, I would say.
I can see it now. Insert werewolves falling in love here.
That's right.
So I think another benefit too, it sounds like, would be just kind of the accountability factor. Like she probably feels she has to write those 2 chapters in the morning, and so you have something to edit in the afternoon. So maybe it would be a good idea for somebody that's having a hard time motivating themselves as a solo writer, and they're just not getting much done.
Sorry, one second. I'll edit this one out. But hold on, just 1 second. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I'll message it about what that was, and I'll edit it out of the audio. So, one moment.
If I was a really on top of it host, I would have thought of something to say until you got back, but I checked my email.
All right, it's okay. I just messaged you also. So, all right. So, what was your question? I'm sorry. My wife came in. So.
It's okay. So I was thinking that another benefit might be for somebody who's kind of having a problem motivating themselves to write, and they're just not finishing their work as quickly as they want to, that maybe the accountability factor could be really helpful. Like I imagine she feels she really has to get those 2 chapters done. And, so you can edit in the afternoon. So she, if it was me, I'd be like feeling like, oh, I have to make this deadline so that the other partner would be able to do their part.
Right. I think that's one of the big things too. And we have had days where one of us doesn't do their part, or can't do it. And I mean, that does weigh on you. And since I don't know if, I guess if your friends could probably do this too, if you're writing with friends or whatever, it may be a little weird if you're writing with someone for the first time, but where it's my wife and I, for instance, if I haven't done the beats that day at dinner, she'll be like, well, you haven't done any of the beats, so I can't write in the morning. You need to go do those. And I was like, I'll do it later. And then, if it's bedtime and I haven't done them, she's like, well, you better get up earlier than me tomorrow and do those beats. And so there's definitely the like kind of bugging to do them, but also the accountability, like you said. All right, everyone, we have something going on the side. So I know we have 5 live viewers. So, all right, and I have some questions for you, Lindsay. I do have to run away for a minute though. So I don't know how you will be about just talking about your topic. I know that you had some stuff kind of planned already, and if you do talk about it, I may have to come back and listen to it after the fact. But my wife.
Well, do you want to just finish up? I can ask you like one more question and we can just call it for the week and continue another time.
That's okay. Yeah, we can do that. I really want to get your information about this revitalizing a series, but unfortunately for anyone watching live, my wife just got a really bad phone call about a member of her family in the hospital. So things happen sometimes. So unfortunately, but hopefully everything's okay, and I will let anyone concerned know again on our next episode. So yeah, if you want to throw me your last question, and we'll do another maybe half show in the next half week or so, and just add on top of this for the audio.
All right, cool. Yeah, the last thing I was going to ask was for dealing with money. I mean, for you guys, obviously you live together, so it's probably not a big deal. But if somebody's thinking of collaborating with somebody that lives on the other side of the world, how would you guys, do you think would you go about figuring out who gets to submit the book, or would you create a publishing house, or what would be the best way to do that?
Now, for us, it is obviously a little different because we have a shared bank account, so as a married couple, I haven't co-authored anything with anyone else, so any other authors aside from my wife, but we do have our own publishing house registered as, well, it's right now it's just a DBA, do business as. I would suggest probably if you're going to do it with someone else to, you probably want to get an LLC or something like that. I won't go too far into that portion, but when it comes to money for someone other than like your significant other, you definitely always have to be a little bit cautious of that. So again, not only when you find someone to write with, you not only need to trust them to write with you, to write good books with you and everything, but also someone that you can trust money-wise. So, like I said, I don't have any experience doing it with anyone else, so it's hard to say. But definitely, it comes down to whoever you're writing with. Make sure that you trust them entirely. So.
All right, I see your cat doing laps in the background, so he's probably telling you it's time to go.
Yeah, I think she knows something's wrong too. So animals seem to do that when people are upset. So.
All right, do you want to close with any tips for anybody who might be thinking of co-authoring?
Sure, and so like I said, the biggest thing is just find someone that you mesh really well with, whether if it's your significant other, great, especially if they have, I know there are definitely lots of other couples that write separately. I see it on the Kindle boards and things that people publish separately that are married or, boyfriend, girlfriend, etc. So, especially if you can kind of, like Lindsay said, put your ego aside, and when the other person's telling you they don't think something is good, which being on that end also takes a little bit of courage. So because a lot of times when I read something, I'm like, that doesn't make sense. I'm like, man, now I have to tell my wife that doesn't make sense. So make sure on your end that you're able to look at it as a reader or an editor more so than that person's friend or that person's husband or such. And that's on your side. As far as finding the other person, make sure that they can kind of put away their ego as well to do the same to you, and don't get bent out of shape of it. As long as you're both trying to create the best book and you trust each other, both writing wise and financially. If it's someone, like I said, not your significant other, I think you'll be okay. And the worst case scenario is right off the bat, just say, let's try this. If it doesn't work out, no hard feelings. It's fine. And I think it's definitely worth trying, though, especially for all those people that maybe don't have enough time to do all this on their own. If you can divide that up with someone else, it may be a good opportunity to get a couple of books out as a team before you venture out on your own, even. So.
All right, well, sounds like good advice, and I hope that anybody who's thinking of co-authoring maybe took something away from your experience. And it's great that you guys are making an income and can make a living from writing now. That's really cool.
Yeah, for sure. We're really happy that I was able to leave the normal job last year. So, all right, that's it for us for this week. Again, sorry everyone for the really short show. As long as Lindsay's up to it, I'd like to have the second half of this a different day before our next show, and maybe combine the two. So anyone listening on iTunes or anything, this is already edited out, so never mind. But anyone watching the video, I will, if we do manage to get that one, I'll make a 16-2. Lindsay had some really interesting stuff that we wanted to talk about revitalizing an old series, which we have an old series I'm really interested in. But again, we got a bad phone call, so I have to go check that stuff out. But until next week, though, thanks again, everyone, for watching.
All right, bye-bye, guys.